Welcome to the channel. Welcome into the Rewire Fitness Podcast. My name is Kevin from Rewire Fitness, and today I'm going to go over boredom and ADHD. I know what you're thinking. Easy subject. When you have ADHD, you're bored a lot. And so I agree, if you have ADHD, it's hard to find things that are interesting unless you have already determined what things that you like that are interesting to you. And with ADHD, those interests may change. So something that you may have found interesting before may not be the thing that you find interesting now. And so you're probably wondering, well, what the heck is this about? It's about using boredom to explain to someone else that does not have ADHD how ADHD is like. And not all the ins and not all the details and everything like that, but boredom is easy to relate to. Everybody gets bored. People without ADHD get bored. People with ADHD get bored more. And so you can explain how ADHD is like to somebody who doesn't have it by saying, hey, it is boredom. Have you ever been bored before? Now imagine that you're bored a lot more. And that's a very, very basic thing about ADHD. And they can understand that. It's so much easier to explain to someone, hey, ever been bored? And they'll say, yeah. Imagine being bored a lot more, a lot of times through your day, like all the time. And then you're searching and searching and searching for something that's more interesting so that you're not bored, but that's like an all day kind of search. Imagine that. And then you can explain that to a person and they'll be like, oh, I get it. So we're going to go over this article and what they say in the article. There's a lot more to what they say than what I just explained. If you want to see about that and see about all the article and what it says and everything, then go ahead and keep listening, keep watching. And before I get into it, if you like this podcast, if you like this YouTube channel, go ahead and click the subscribe button on either platform. Also, if you're on YouTube, press the notification bell, leave a like, leave a comment. With all that being said, let's get into it. Okay, let's dive into this article and see what it has to say. And it says right here, often judged and rarely understood, people with ADHD experience the world differently. At the risk of oversimplification, we suggest thinking feels different for people with ADHD. What's more, many of the behaviors associated with ADHD can be understood as attempts to escape uncomfortable feelings about thinking. So these feelings really matter. They shape the lives of individuals with ADHD. But of course, unless you have ADHD, you don't really know what it's like. And so that is very important, right? It's very important because people without ADHD do not know what it's like. They have no idea. They don't have any idea like what you go through, how you think, how you focus, how your interests just shift from one interest to another, to another, to another very quickly. They don't have any idea what it's like to have so many things coming in at once that you cannot focus and you cannot really decide what you focus on because you focus on everything. They have no idea what you think. They have no idea how much outside the box you think. They just don't understand. And so since they don't understand, then they're going to look at it in a different way. They're going to look at you in a different way than you are trying to project, or a different way than you actually are experiencing things. They don't know what you're going through. And so that's just one of the things that when you have ADHD, you probably are dealing with. You're probably seeing someone or being around someone that has no idea, doesn't understand. And that if you tell them you have ADHD, then they're going to look at you and say, well, I still don't understand. You have to go through and explain it to them. But what I'm going to go through in the article is going to explain a way that you can explain it to them without going into everything, because going into everything about ADHD is a very long and can be a very complicated conversation. And it takes time. It takes a lot of time. So this is a way that you can get people to relate to what you go through without going into everything. You don't want to go into everything at once, right? And I don't know why I'm saying everything, like drawing it out, right? No idea. Anyway, let's get back to the article. And here it is, says there is, however, a common touchstone shared by people who do and do not suffer from ADHD, the pain of being unable to engage our mind in a word, boredom. Most of us have been afflicted by boredom at some point, but for people with ADHD, boredom, the really soul crushing, unremitting kind, is a near constant companion, always lurking and waiting to strike. So that is very interesting because this author's position on boredom is it's like, I want to say like an assassin, right? It's like a thief hiding like stealth, like stealth, like behind you, waiting to strike you. I don't see it like that. I don't know. I don't know what I would see it like that, but I do see they're trying to make it serious, right? They're trying to help you understand how serious it is. And if someone that doesn't have ADHD reads this article, they want to make sure they understand how serious it is. But if I thought it was like a ninja waiting to strike, I think I would be a lot more scared of it. And there's really nothing to be scared about boredom. You're just trying to figure out, okay, how in the world am I going to find something that doesn't make me bored? How am I going to find an interest? How am I going to find something that gets me really interested and that helps me to get dopamine flowing, right? Because that's another point of it. You find something interesting, you get your dopamine flowing. And if you have ADHD, you are operating at a dopamine deficiency. So you just want to get to the level that everyone else has that doesn't have this dopamine deficiency. And it's really about being interested. And so if you're bored and you're bored to the extreme, which is what people don't understand if they don't have ADHD, is not the boredom to the extreme. They understand like regular boredom, right? They understand regular boredom, right? They understand that, I got some time. I don't have much to do. I'm just kind of sitting around. I'm bored. They don't understand, like, hey, I am bored to the extreme, the extreme, extreme. I can't find anything that's interesting right now. And no matter where I am, I just don't find things interesting. Like, I should be having a good time at this. Not interesting. Oh, I should be doing this. Not interested. Oh, I really need to do something like this. Still not interesting. And having that feeling all day long. And so when you have ADHD, you have to explain that to them. Look, I want to be interested in things, but I'm just not finding anything that's interesting right now. And I know when I do that I'll be really into that thing, like I'll be super laser focused into that thing. But it's so hard for me to find something that's interesting. I stay bored all the time. And now you have to explain to them it's not your normal kind of boredom. It's like the extreme kind of boredom. And so I'm constantly looking, or you're constantly looking for things that don't make you bored. So your interests switch all the time. And then you can kind of explain that to them. Hey, I know you get bored sometimes, but it is nothing like what I go through. Not even close. But I'm going to go back to your article, see what else it has to say. And let's look back at the article here. It says, for those of us without ADHD, recalling our worst moments of boredom might provide a small taste of what it's like to have ADHD. Doing so might help us be a little more understanding why people with ADHD struggle in the ways they do. And it says a central role of boredom in the life of people with ADHD is well known to those who work closely with them. And the clinical ADHD literature is full of references to boredom. There are also a wealth of studies showing that adults who are especially prone to boredom report elevated symptoms of ADHD. But these are non-clinical samples, leaving us in the dark about what is true for the people who have been diagnosed with ADHD. And that's interesting, right? Like, a role. What is the role of boredom like in your life, like just in general? Like when you think about boredom, like are you just I have it all day long, or have you found some interest that really keep you like going, or is it just like, hey, I can't deal with it. I'm bored so much and I keep trying to find things that interest me and I just can't. And when you find that things that interest you, are you like, yes, I finally found something that interests me? And then do you eventually get bored with that thing, right? And then move on to something else? Maybe, right? But they go over the role of boredom. Like boredom has an actual role. I know if it was me and I could get rid of boredom, that would be the first thing I like throw out. If there was a way to just get rid of boredom, I'd be like, yeah, you can have that. Can I exchange it for, can I exchange it for the interest and stuff? Like, can I buy interest and let boredom go? Can I trade boredom in? So it's not there anymore. Like if boredom was a physical thing, can you like trade it in? Like you trade a car in and get something more interesting, slight interest, more interest, all that kind of stuff. But that's a tangent, right? So what I'm saying is this: is that boredom has a role, and that's just so interesting that they were saying boredom has an actual role, and that there's so many references to boredom, and that people can see it if they are close to you, if they work closely with you, they can see it. They can see how much boredom affects your life. And looking more into more what the article says, that it says they studied children and they were rated by their parents as being more prone to boredom. This is an experiment that they did, or a study that it did, not and it says right here, I'm going to go over it real quick and I'll show you what it says about it. It says that this doctor and colleagues studied children and adolescents who were formerly diagnosed with ADHD and confirmed that indeed they were rated by their parents as being more prone to boredom. In addition, the children and adolescents with ADHD became more bored compared to the participants without ADHD after completing a tedious test of attention. And their increased boredom predicted worse performance. So that makes complete sense to me. You know, tests in general are not very fun. They're not very interesting. You're being tested on subject that you don't really care about a lot of times. Like if you're a kid and in school, do you really care about some of the subjects that you take? You have subjects that are your favorite, and then some subjects that you just don't like, and that's just with every person. But if you are in a subject that you really don't like and have ADHD, and you're really bored in the class, because as soon as the teacher gets up and starts going into that subject that you don't like, that you have no interest in, then you just kind of space out, right? Or if you're an adult and went through this as a kid, then you understand what I'm saying. You understand that you were in class and you just spaced out, like you didn't care about what the teacher was saying. Now, you may have still gotten good grades. You may be in a class still gotten good grades because you went home, studied, found a way to still do it. But in class, they're teaching and teaching and teaching, and you're sitting there kind of spaced out because you have no interest in the subject. But in some cases, what happens is you have no interest in the subject, and the teacher's up there teaching and teaching and teaching, and you miss out on everything, and then you fail the test. You fail what is going on in the overall, in school, in classes, and you start to get bad grades. And so you're trying to figure out how you can figure these things out. Like how can I get better grades? How can I excel? How can I be good enough academically to go to college or get a degree or whatever it is? But yet you have challenges because you go to these classes and your interest kind of fails you, right? And now you're trying to figure out, well, how do I get interested in this class? And sometimes you'll be in a class where you are not interested at all and you do some kind of project and thing, and that brings you to the interested side of things, right? Like, oh, this project's cool, let's do this. Or, oh, this paper is cool, oh, I get it, let's do that. Or you figure something out and figure out this is really interesting as a subject. I didn't figure that out before because I had no idea. I didn't really understand, but now I understand, and now I love this subject. And it can change that fast when you have ADHD. You might hate something at one time, and then a few days later, you might say, ooh, I love it. It's interesting. And then you see a change in the person in relation to that thing if you don't have ADHD, and see someone with ADHD and all of a sudden see that, wow, they're really interested in that now. I had no idea they had an interest in that. I had no idea they liked that certain thing. The funny part is, if you have ADHD, you didn't know either. You're kind of just going through finding something interesting, and they're looking from the outside and saying, I didn't know you were interested in that. You're thinking in the back of your mind, I didn't know either until right about 5 minutes ago. I was interested in it, or 2 days ago, but now I am, and next week I might not be interested anymore. There might be something else that I'm interested in, and that quick it can switch. And so I think it's just really interesting that here they did this experiment. I mean, you get bored, the children did worse, in this experiment, and that makes perfect sense, right? They did worse because of the fact that they're bored. And something else they said that I think is interesting here that I'm going to go over and show you real quick. It says, we know that boredom gets in the way for all of us. It comes to paying attention, but this study suggests that people with ADHD may feel boredom more intensely. In the face of increased boredom, focusing attention is just that much more challenging, setting up a vicious cycle that can be challenging to break. And then they go into, in another recent study, parental reports of boredom proneness and ADHD symptoms were correlated in children and adolescents diagnosed with ADHD. The researchers also found that after 3 months of treatment with stimulant medication, both ADHD symptoms and boredom proneness decreased. But when medication was withdrawn, ADHD symptoms and boredom proneness increased once again in a lockstep fashion. The idea that boredom is associated with reduced physiological arousal and thus alleviated by stimulant medication is not a new one, and suggests how tight the association may be between boredom and ADHD. So, now, depending if you want to take medication or do take medication, I can't recommend either way. This is a case that medication is successful, and they are telling you about how the medication worked in this particular case. But again, I always say medication, whether you take it or not, is up to you. You decide what's best for you. You decide what's best for your body. But the most interesting thing about this is that they went through and said, you're prone to boredom. If you're prone to boredom, then you do better when that boredom is no longer there. And that makes sense, because if you are just bored and you are locked down in boredom as what they say, then you're going to do worse at things because of the fact that you're trying to figure it out. You're trying to figure out why you're bored, and you're so bored that you just aren't motivated to do those things. You're just not motivated to do this thing or do that thing because you're stuck in boredom from one thing, and then that basically locks you up, so you don't want to go do this other thing, or you don't want to try this other thing because you're like, I'm bored. That doesn't sound really appetizing or appealing to me. Why would I go over there? Or this other thing doesn't really sound that appealing to me, so why would I go over that way? So that's what it's about. You're trying to find ways to not be bored. Now, the next part of this article goes into being bored and risk taking. Because when you have ADHD, if you're bored, why not take a risk? Is what a lot of people think. Hey, I'm bored. Let's go to the other way. Let's go extreme. Let's take a risk. Let's buy something that I don't really need, but it looks cool right now, and so I'm gonna go and buy it. Or hey, I impulsively buy this. Maybe you buy a cat tower and don't have a cat. People come by and say, "Wow, you got a cat tower? Do you a cat tower? Do you have a cat?" No. Why do you buy the cat tower? I don't know. Look at the time. Just like impulsive things that you buy and you don't have any idea why you bought them at the time. It looked cool. You're like, oh, cat tower looks cool. It's green. I like the color green. Or it's red. I like the color red. Kind of looks cool. If I got a cat, they would really appreciate it. I don't have a cat right now, but might as well get prepared, right? It has a good deal. I'll go ahead and buy it. That's how some people think. That's how it comes about that you end up with strange things that you just had no reason to buy. It just looked cool at the time. And so that's part of risk taking. Now, that can get you in trouble financially, but you may be taking even bigger risk with something else, risk physically, and that could be bad as well. So let's look at what they say about risk taking real quick. This is another thing with ADHD and boredom have in common is risky behavior. People are prone to boredom, engage in more risky behavior, and when made bored, it seems we all are more likely to roll the dice. Similarly, ADHD is also associated with impulsivity and risky decision making. Mathis, I guess this person and colleagues note that individuals with ADHD may engage in risky behavior and make poor choices precisely in order to stave off feelings of boredom. They brought adults with and without ADHD in the lab and asked them to complete a game of dice which assesses the willingness to take risks. Sure enough, those with ADHD engaged in more risky decision making, but things got really interesting in the second part of the study when researchers made everyone bored before playing the dice game. When individuals without ADHD were bored, their risky decision making increased from pre-boredom levels and became comparable to the participants with ADHD. It says that both increased to the same level. And so I thought that was really interesting to see that the article is saying whether you have ADHD or not, it all falls to the same level. So, and the last thing it really goes over is, of course, this example is great, but it's not the same as having actual ADHD, right? There's no way that being bored is the same as having ADHD. That's not the point. The point of it is this is of the fact that it's an easy way to explain part of what ADHD is like. And that's really what the article is about. If you are trying to find some common ground with somebody, then you can express, hey, you ever been bored? And they'll say, yeah, I've been bored before, right? What about being bored? All the time. More extreme. To the ultimate level of boredom. Like if you had a superhero that was called Mr. Bored, then you would have the ultimate power. That's what it's like. If your power came from boredom and you have ADHD and you were a superhero, you would be like Superman level of power. If you have ADHD, you'd be like, man, I am just super strong. Now, the disadvantage of that, when you get super interested in something, you're going to go weak, right? That'll be your kryptonite. But the point is that it's a common ground. It's something you can talk about and kind of get the conversation going. And with all the stigma, everything going on with ADHD, it's hard to find common ground that you can talk about and get the conversation started. So if it helps to get the conversation started, and I think it's good to use this example, at least you can get started talking about it, starting to explain it, and then maybe people will open up and say, "Oh, I really want to know more about this. I didn't know this is what you're kind of going through, but now I'm more interested in what you have to say." So it's all about that, just starting the conversation and finding some common ground and having common ground with people. And so let me know what you think about this. Let me know if you think this is a great example. This is something that I could use every day, or I could use, a couple times here and there to see if it works. This example of using boredom and relating it to people and relating it back to ADHD. Or if you think this is not a really good idea, I don't really want to explain it that way because there's so much more to ADHD. I don't know if this would actually help, kind of thing. Or if maybe you just want to try it and see, right? Maybe you're in the middle and you're like, yeah, I'll try it. Not sure if it'll work. But if it does, great. If it doesn't, eh. But whatever you decide, it's just something to think about. I thought the article was interesting. I thought it would be good to really, just go over it and see if you can get some additional information that can help you through it. Okay, with all that being said, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me and watching on YouTube if you're on there. And I hope you have a wonderful and great day, and I will talk to you later.